Okay, we're live now.
Hey Bartello,
Let's just
hype
say that class of 2018 is the best class.
hype for winning Pride Week by
Yeah,
50 points, but we still won. Oh yeah.
still got my red bandana on for the special occasion. So, that's all I'm
Uh,
winning.
I guess we should jump right into Bartello's question as per usual.
Of
So
course.
talks about alienation and loneliness throughout the three main characters of the novel. It's pretty evident, as she says in there, that they're all pretty lonely. And I guess one of the similarities that I caught on to when it comes to their loneliness, I guess, is their willingness to isolate themselves from others. I mean, for the monster, it wasn't at first, though, I will say, because he really desperately wanted interaction. But once the treatment started kicking in, where everybody was just treating him like the way they saw him, a monster, that's when he started willingly isolating himself from everybody, basically. Because no matter each time he tried to reach out, he was kind of shunned to the side.
Yeah.
I can see how that kind of connects to Victor when he was out on the ocean. Let me see what chapter it is. It was chapter.
I think it was 18.
Yeah. Yeah.
When he's
It was
underwater.
chapter 18 when he gets lost out in the ocean and he fears like himself being isolated. I thought of it as kind of like ironic how he feared isolation and like what it would do to him, but he clearly sees what it does to the monster and still doesn't allow him like to have other beings like him.
I feel like it's kind of ironic in a sense. Like, I agree with what you were saying, but I also see that it's ironic given the fact that he's fearing what isolation will do to him, but he actually puts himself through that like on purpose, which I found really weird. I was like, why are you fearing it if you're already doing it as a choice?
Mm-hmm.
He continuously tends to shield his emotions in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the ship was like involuntary. Like what he's doing now is kind of like him voluntarily isolating himself, but he still has people out there that he could talk to. Like Henry still like chases after him. He's still got his dad. Like he's all these other people, but like if he got stranded in the ocean, then he wouldn't have that, and he would truly have like isolation.
Mm-hmm.
Would you consider in that sense then a ship like a symbol of what he's doing to himself in a sense? Like he is the one carrying himself up on that ship because he's further sailing himself away from his family and his relatives because the more he sails himself out, the more isolated he becomes, and here he is fearing it for himself, but here's the one here he is doing this to himself, basically.
Yeah.
I could see the ship being a symbol of that, but I could also see like the storm being a symbol too. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't there a storm happening when he was creating the monster, or is that just like from a movie that I saw?
No, I think that was part of it. It might have been like bad weather, like cloudy, and I
I
think
think,
it was
yeah.
lightning. Yeah, that was a lot of that.
Well, that could kind of be like a hint at like the author trying to oh my gosh, do to him what he did to the monster.
Mm-hmm. I was gonna kind of say how each of their like how each character was lonely and like isolated, but I felt like there was different motives behind it. Like I said before with Victor, like he kind of chose to be isolated in order to focus on his goals. Um, y'all are gonna have to remind me Walton's reason, but with the monster, his isolation was like it wasn't a choice. Like he kind of had to deal with that personally, and his isolation is mainly due to like prejudice.
Walton's isolation was pretty willing. He didn't really allow himself to open up to all of his other crewmates because he kind of felt entitled. Like, remember, he kind of felt like he was better than everyone, so he
Oh
didn't
yeah,
really try to associate with them as much.
yeah. I was also gonna say, I don't know if this is irrelevant or not, but I remember reading in like the chapters. I forget which chapter it was, but I remembered that Victor actually compared himself to being like a wretch. And that's what the monster compared himself to previously. So I looked up what the word wretch means, and it says unfortunate or unhappy person. But the thing is with Victor, he kind of forces himself to be unhappy. Like he chooses to take that path. Like he has options. Like he doesn't have to deal with the prejudice as much as the monster does. Meanwhile, the monster is actually like forced to be unhappy. Like he just simply can't be happy with society because of the prejudice that they live in. So.
Yeah, I think it kind of, as the reader with, I guess, humane emotions, it kind of draws your sympathy more towards the monster than it does Victor, which I'd actually like to bring that up. It's a little interesting. As you learn more and more about the story, I feel like in the beginning, was it just me, or in the beginning you felt kind of bad for Victor because here he is saying, like, I lost everything. I'm all alone in this world. I have no family to call my own. Like, you guys felt kind of bad about that, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like the more you read the story, the more and more your sympathy shifts less from him and more to the monster. Because the monster has such humane emotions, but every time he tries to be nice, every time there is some form of hope, like despair kind of just kicks in. There's literally nobody that's willing to be nice for him. And the one time that he has a chance, it's always taken away from him. Like the family in the cottage, and in these chapters, the monster, the female monster that was going to be created for him. And you just kind of start to, as the reader, your opinion shifts and you can't even like sympathize with Victor anymore. And Victor's the one telling his sorrowful story. And I just find that kind of interesting.
Yeah. I was actually gonna say something about like the monster seeking vengeance on like society as like a theme. But I don't know if y'all want to jump into that just yet, so I'll save that when we talk about it.
Well, I just wanted to like bring up I kind of thought like the reminder of Victor's like marriage to Elizabeth, because I kind of forgot about it. I don't know about you guys, but like I thought they were either married or they just weren't talking anymore. But I felt like that reminder of like his marriage to Elizabeth and the fact that the monster wanted I would say a wife. I would like, it was like a female companion. I would say like he wanted to get married to her, like in the monster way. I don't know how monsters get married. But like it was kind of like to show like a foil between Victor and the monster, and how the monster is like involuntarily happy, like you said, Sarah, and like Victor is voluntarily unhappy.
Actually, that brings me a question here. So you know how the Victor killed the female monster before she had a chance to breathe life, essentially?
Yeah.
And you made the comparison to the female monster and Elizabeth in a sense being connected. Do you think that him destroying female monster could be like a potential foreshadow to Elizabeth dying? Because like it's by his hands that he's creating the female, like he's destroying the female monster, but because of his actions now, later down the road, he's killing Elizabeth.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I didn't either.
I could definitely see that happening, to be honest. I don't know.
I had something in my notes about that. Let me find it.
Do you know how long it's going to take you to look for it?
No, I just found it.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there we go.
I just had to type in like a word real quick.
There we go. Control F.
Reading it over, I was like, what did I mean? So at the end of chapter 20, I said it seems his sister's death foreshadows his own. So going back to chapter 20, when no. I'm sorry. I'm getting my like chapters confused now. It's been a long day. But
okay, Emily.
Like his own like sister's death. I could forget her name.
Elizabeth?
But I thought that was his
wife.
Yeah, I thought that was his wife.
I'm pretty sure that it's like both.
No, because I thought Elizabeth was like a cousin or something. And then they later like grew closer and then that's when they got into
Adopted sister.
yeah, something of that nature.
Yeah. Well, when his sister died, no, his sister died, so it wouldn't be his wife here.
Are you talking about Justine, the girl that died before?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay,
okay. That
okay.
makes sense.
We're getting our names mixed up. Sorry.
Been a long
So,
day.
no, it seems like his sister's death foreshadows his own because when the monster framed William, no, oh my gosh, now I'm getting
All right, Justine.
okay. So just the monster framed Justine, which caused Justine's death. I thought since the monster at the end, it seemed like the monster framed Victor. I thought that would foreshadow his own death.
Okay.
Oh, I actually did because the whole thing kind of parallels him being blamed for murder and her being blamed for murder. That's interesting.
Yeah.
It took me forever to get there, so I'm sorry.
No, it's fine,
It's
honestly.
okay. It kind of connects to the point I was saying, the whole foreshadowing death thing. That's cool.
Right.
So I actually wanted to talk a little bit more about the female monster because it continues to bring up the idea of a woman being passive throughout this book because Victor saw this female monster as a potential threat because here he was creating her and he was like, oh my gosh, what if she creates evil babies with this guy? What if they decide that they want to go on a whole ransack and destroy mankind together? What if? So before she has the chance to breathe life, essentially, he kills her, which kind of ensures the idea of the woman being passive and her having no control over the scenario. What are your thoughts on that?
I could see that because Elizabeth has been trying to get married to Victor and she hasn't done it yet, which shows that she's very passive.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate a little more on that? I'm trying to like get a better understanding.
So, kind of throughout the book, you see the idea of like a woman being passive throughout the book. Like, remember in the cottage, the girl Agatha kind of always listened to Felix. Elizabeth always Elizabeth always listens to like the male figures, like her dad and to Victor. She doesn't really try and stray from that. This is another idea and a reminder of the passiveness of a woman in the book, essentially. Because the female, before she has any say whatsoever, she's being forced to listen to the male figure above her creating her. So she's being killed, essentially, before she can exist, ensuring her passiveness in the novel.
Yeah. All right. Now I understand. Okay. But yeah, I definitely agree with that now that I get what you're saying.
I don't know. I feel like you say something.
I was just gonna say that it was like ironic that would happen because the book was written by a female.
Yeah, I've been thinking that like the entire time, honestly, because she always like it's a woman writing this, and there's always a passive role for the woman throughout this entire book. So it almost kind of made me think of as a greater whole. During that time, we all know that women were not as high as men. And in this situation, Victor was fearful of the woman and what she could do. And I think on a greater sense, before women started gaining rights, I think men were kind of terrified of what women could do if they were above him. You think you get that? Like,
yeah.
Because women were always below men. So I think one of the things that they always tried to do was control the woman so they did not gain any form of advantage above him. And I think Victor can kind of resemble that because here he is becoming fearful of what this woman could potentially do. So before she has the potential of doing anything, he kind of kills that.
Do you think that Shelley did this on purpose, kind of like to highlight how much power that women actually do have rather than to try to like tear them down in a sense?
I think that it's a potential that she did that, yeah. I don't have any idea of whether or not she was a feminist at the time. But if she was for the idea of women rights, I especially could see how she would write a book like this with the idea of the passiveness of a woman reoccurring over.
I'm looking up to see if she was a feminist or not.
I could also see it as a way to show how controlling Victor is, because you kept mentioning like Victor as like a main controlling character.
Mm-hmm.
So just to like, I feel like she did that also to emphasize how much she wanted control over things, kind of like a god, I would say.
Yeah. I think speaking of God, I think the idea of Adam and Eve is brought up again because here, like, as before, we've compared the monster to being Adam. In a sense, when he came to Victor asking for a girl, like asking for a woman companion, it kind of reminded me of in the Bible how once Adam was created, he immediately realized how lonely he was and asked God, "Can I have a companion so I'm not lonely?" So here he was kind of how Adam asked for his Eve. Here he was like kind of asking for his own Eve.
Yeah.
I didn't think of that. That's actually like really cool. Like really smart.
Yeah, now that you brought it up.
I guess like another point, like to add on to that, like I don't necessarily think Victor was thinking this, but I think Shelley was kind of like thinking this as a reference to Adam and Eve when Adam had Eve. She eventually brought corruption to him.
Yeah.
So I think that also connects to what Victor was thinking, that the female would bring corruption to him.
Oh yeah,
I see. That's
really
interesting.
Yeah, but I didn't think of that before. I thought like
you just brought my point to another level here, Emily.
Honestly. What would you guys like to talk about next?
So I kind of want to bring up Henry a little bit because I know we've brought this up before about how Henry contrasts Victor, and I think I just want to say like there's another thing that is brought up is how like before it was kind of just more of simply like emotions, but here in these chapters Henry kind of represents like the safe route to curiosity and knowledge, because here he is like being really passionate about his knowledge and wanting to pursue that, but he's not blinded by obsession, and that kind of just further emphasizes Victor's obsession and loneliness.
Yeah, I feel like Henry is just there to show how crazy Victor is.
Yeah, really.
He's always like the normal one, and then Victor is always the one who creates like monsters and like has obsessions with science and how things work. And Henry, sorry.
Yeah, continue.
Oh, but like Henry comes along and it kind of like shows the reader again like just how unusual Victor is.
I was gonna say that Henry kind of seems like that character that kind of brings like balance in a sense. Like with all the crazy stuff going on like in one area, then there's Henry over here just
chilling. I also think he kind of just shows how isolating Victor really is, because here he is continuously trying to reach out and help Victor, but it goes kind of back to how like here Victor is isolating himself and further drifting out to sea, I guess you could say.
Like in the ship.
Yeah, like on the ship.
What were we going to say again? Sorry.
Oh, I wasn't saying anything.
Oh.
Good. Do we want to bring up another topic, or do we want to talk more about Victor himself? Or
we can talk about something else. I mean, it's up to y'all.
Yeah.
We have about 10 minutes exactly. 10 minutes? Yeah, 10 minutes. I was going to talk about like themes, I guess you can say.
Go ahead.
So while I was reading, I came up with like two. One of them we already talked a lot about with isolation, but I definitely feel like isolation led to another theme, which is vengeance, especially with the monster.
Oh.
So, what I have here, I was saying how when the DeLacy's, forgive me if I said that wrong, when they decided to move out for good, like that was basically the monster's only light of hope, which actually sparked like his rage, which resulted like in the burning down of that house.
Mm-hmm.
And really quick before I go on, I actually like looked up the symbols because like that's just who I am. So when I looked up the symbolism for fire, it says passions, compulsion, zeal, creativity, and motivation. And then when I said the symbolism of a house, it was like when we dream of many houses, we are often aware that the possibilities that are before us as we explore and decide where to go next. And it says a house often symbolizes the inner self. The street or the road of the house is often represents one's life path. So combining those two together, like a burning house, it kind of symbolizes that it's time to make a new start. So, and it says to dream that a house is on fire indicates that you need to undergo some sort of transformation. So I saw this as like the monster taking a new approach to like society. Like instead of him approaching everybody in a nice sort of way and like being friendly, he decides to just start hurting people because he's tired of being hurt himself. And he's pretty much angry at society for like taking his innocence away. So that's basically the Lacey's moving out was just the start of like his vengeance streak.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but was the house burned at night?
That's a good question.
Because if I'm not mistaken, the house was burned specifically at night.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I thought it was.
All right. So to add on to that idea, I definitely agree what you're saying here. The idea of the burning house representing a form of transformation. I think the concept of the fact that it happened at dark represents his transformation into a dark and evil path, actually, because darkness often tends to, in a negative sense, represent like loneliness and emptiness, and the darkness has basically been consuming him. So this burning house happening at night represents the transformation that he is undergoing, specifically from good to bad. And I think that's also emphasized in the fact that he only travels at night. And I think the fact that him traveling at night shows and symbolizes his loneliness, especially.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. In my notes for when he burns down the house, I put it's the Delancey's leaving their home most likely shows the monster that he will never really have a home, and that the burning of it symbolizes his descent into a hateful and sad monster.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I also feel like in the future the monster will definitely take vengeance on Victor because I remember he said like he referred to him as man for one thing, like didn't even acknowledge him by his real name.
Yeah.
And two, he said like I will be there with you at the wedding. So I feel like that could foreshadow like Victor's death, like or his fall or decline of his fall.
When he said when he called Victor the man, I definitely felt like a shift from the monster, because everyone calls like monster like the monster. They don't really have a name for him. And by the monster calling him the man, I felt like it was like lowering him, like everyone else lowers the monster, like to like just like a being, not even like a soul or a person.
Yeah, I see that.
Kind of like specifically denouncing him and going out of his way to belittle him.
Yeah.
Because the monster doesn't even have a name for himself, so why does he feel like Victor should be called by his own name when Victor abandoned him?
Right. Like I feel like he's tired of people, like the judgment of people and the authority that some people have over him because he's kind of, I don't know, I feel like in some points he's very like he's kind of helpless in a sense because he can't help who he is, and then people who are considered like normal, they often have like this authority over him, and they can basically just do what they want with him.
Mm-hmm. He's basically had enough of it.
Mm-hmm.
What do we want to talk about next then? Do we want to go into nature one more time? Because nature just seems to be brought up all the time. Mary Shelley and her obsession with nature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So here's one thing that I started to notice. Victor is no longer able to reassure himself happiness with nature. The monster was able to at least give it one more try, but Victor can no longer do it. And nature has now just become a reminder of what he has done. It's now a symbol of punishment, essentially. Whenever he goes out there, he realizes how much he tampered with nature and realizes what he really shouldn't have done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always thought like nature was there to punish him, but more like to remind him of his failure.
Yeah.
Like, he tried to create like this like super being that everyone would love and everyone would worship him for. But then he created this monster that kills people and hates him because he created him. And just by like being around nature, which is what he studied to create this monster, it just reminds him of how he failed with the monster.
He kind of failed nature itself because it was because of the fact that he was so curious and fascinated by nature that he sought out all of this knowledge. Like from the beginning, he always mentioned how much he loved nature and it was a symbol of his happiness. But it's almost kind of like he betrayed nature, so nature punished him, and now he can only remember the betrayal that he's given nature, so he can no longer feel the happiness that he once did.
I was gonna say something about that. So I know earlier you mentioned how when he was building the second monster for the original one, like as a companion, and how he destroyed it based off of like the passiveness and everything. Do you think that another reason why he could have destroyed it was because he didn't want to like add to the destruction that he's already caused?
Absolutely. I'm pretty sure that he mentions that actually, because whenever he sees that monster, all he sees is the punishment that he's created, like the abomination that he's created. So this, I remember, like I think I remember him saying that it just only adds to it essentially.
Yeah.
I could also see it as as another punishment for the monster for making Victor kind of feel lonely, even though it wasn't like the monster's fault. He indirectly made Victor very like miserable and very isolated because of what he thought of as a failure. And trying to create the female monster and then destroying it was just a way to like, punish the monster for doing that to him.
Would you mind elaborating on that a little more? I'm slightly confused.
So when Victor created the monster, it was like hideous and it eventually killed his younger brother and his younger sister, which brought him misery. And because of his failure with the monster, nature can no longer make him happy and he just isolates himself because of the monster, basically. So by him trying to create the female, and then when he sees the monster in the window, he reminds him of kind of like the misery that the monster brought him. And he destroys the female to kind of punish the monster.
I don't necessarily agree that it was to punish the monster. Actually, I think he was thinking more about the consequences of what could happen if the female monster was created, but I regret saying what I just said. I do think it is a punishment I do think of it as punishment on the monster, but I think he was thinking more along the lines of what potentially the female monster could do. Because here that monster is running around and like you said, like smiling in the window. It was kind of like what he saw as a horrifying sight. Now just imagine two of them walking around like that. And what if even more walks around like that because male and female anatomy?
Yeah.
I was gonna say that I'm losing it. No, come back.
You could do it, Courtney.
I feel you.
Wait.
I feel you on that one.
Courtney, that was literally me 2 seconds ago.
Oh, because I literally was thinking about. Oh, okay. Now I got it. I got it back. I was gonna say that I can see what Emily's saying when she says that it was kind of like a punishment for the monster, because if you really think about it, even though it wasn't really his intention at first, with all the destruction that the monster caused, I guess you can kind of say that Victor is like putting out his anger on him, which he really shouldn't because it was his fault because he made it in the first place and chose to force it to be isolated. So destroying what the monster could have loved kind of like resembles Victor's anger on for the monster destroying like things that he loved.
Yeah. I mean, I could see like both points, like mine and Sarah's. I feel like mine was like not as obvious. Not to say like.
Not to say that it's wrong. No.
Yeah, not to say
I don't
that
think it's wrong.
It was just
different point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, if you guys want to wrap it up, we just reached our time.
All right, I think it's okay to wrap it up here.
How many more of these do we have?
Just one more, Courtney. Just one more.
And it's not even next week. Next week is spring break.
We can sleep. We can sleep or do whatever.
All right, then. This has been another seminar. On to our last one. Yay, go class of 2018. Yay. All right.